Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to a scripting language called PHP, which is what is referred to as a server-side scripting language. And what that means is it runs on the server, and I'll show you an illustration of this in just a moment. By comparison to HTML and CSS that you've already been learning this semester, they are referred to as client-side languages or scripting languages because they actually run on the browser. To illustrate this, let me bring you out to some brief illustrations. So you may recall this from, I believe it was the second week of class, when we talked about how the internet and the World Wide Web works. If you recall, there is a client side and then there is the server side. And on the server side, we have a few other things that it can access, such as databases, script servers, and media servers. Well, in the case of PHP, it runs on the script server, and what it's doing is it takes the PHP and translates it and renders it back in HTML when it goes back to the client. And the reason it does this is because it's designed to actually speak with databases and is the capability of making very dynamic sites. For example, PHP is used on some of the biggest sites and frameworks that exist. For example, PHP is what runs WordPress, which is actually a design and development platform for content management systems and is the most popular content management system in the world, and it's one of the biggest blogging systems. The other thing is another little site you might be familiar with also runs on PHP, and that's Facebook. It shows you how dynamic and extensive this language can be. We are just going to touch the absolute tip of this iceberg. We just need to do it so that we can create some templates. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to how PHP is written, and you're going to create your first PHP file. So let's go out. In my case, I'm going to go out to Dreamweaver, and in Dreamweaver, you can open up when you do File New, one of the options under document type you're going to see is PHP. Now, if you're using another sort of text editor, it's really not any different. It's all a matter of how you save it. So we're going to go into PHP and click Create. Notice, this is just HTML. So you're going, well, what's the difference? Why do I need to use this PHP format? Well, technically you don't, because if we were to go File and go File New and select HTML, we're going to get the same looking document. It's all dependent on how you save it. And that's the most important piece. When you save documents that are going to use PHP code, which we're going to type up in just a minute here, then your file needs to be saved as a .php and not a .html. So let's create our first PHP file. So I just gave this a title, and now I'm going to go in between my body tags and we're going to type our first PHP. So I'm just going to give this a little space so we have some room to work with. And when you're starting out a PHP command, you start out with the left-facing little angled bracket, a question mark, and the letters PHP. Notice there are no spaces in between them. That is what tells the server that, hey, there is some PHP language coming here, and so I better pay attention now. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is a really simple piece just to test this out. And then in the future videos, we're going to cover how we're going to be using it in this class to create what are referred to as includes to create our templates. So in order to see something using PHP, we need to use this command called echo. And then I'm going to do a space. I'm going to use quotation marks, and I'm just going to type in the words hello world. We're just going to keep it easy. And every command line in PHP needs to be finished with a semicolon. So that is our command, but now we need to close our PHP because otherwise it's not going to know when to end this, right? So how we end it is simply a question mark and the right-facing angled bracket. So this is our first PHP line of code. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm just going to do a file save as, and this is the part that's really important. I'm just going to call this my first PHP, and notice because I started with an HTML document in Dreamweaver, it wants to save it as HTML. But let's see what happens if we save it as an HTML file. So I'm going to save, leave that HTML there. I'm going to go upload it to my web server. Okay, so I've uploaded my first PHP file to my web server, and now I've navigated out to where it is located on my web space. So I'm at my site, my username.stoutmartech.com. Mine happens to be in a folder called ICT375, and it's called firstphp.html. Notice, nothing shows up here. That's because it's written in PHP, but we've tried to pass it off as HTML, and the HTML doesn't know what to do with it. So let's go back to our Dreamweaver file. Instead of this being an HTML file, let's do a file save as and change this HTML to PHP. We're going to see in Dreamweaver anyway, a couple things are going to happen. The first thing that we're going to notice is look at the color coding that happened. If I go into the one that's just called First PHP HTML, notice that this is all kind of in shades of blue, at least when I've got it on the lighter screen. If I go into the one that I've now just saved as PHP, the PHP opening and closing tags turn to red, and this echo command turns to green, and then what's in these little quotes turns to a slightly different shade of red. So now I've got this saved. Now let's upload this PHP into our web space. So I have it loaded up onto my web space. I'm out of my browser again, and I'm still at the same location that I was before. So at the end of this, instead of saying HTML, I'm going to change this to read PHP and click enter. And there it is. It says hello world. That's the text. If we go back to our PHP file, what's between these quotes is the text that's going to show up on our page. So it says hello world. Now if I go back and it's looking for that HTML file, which still exists out there, I will click refresh on that. You'll see that there's nothing there. And now to help you understand a little bit further about why this is referred to as a server language, I'm still on my HTML document. I'm going to right click and do a view page source. Okay? If I view my page source here, you will see that the PHP is on that page. It's actually there, but the HTML doesn't know what to do with it. But now if I go back to this page where it was my HTML and change that to the PHP file, where it says hello world, if I right click on this to do view page source, look what happens. What happened here is it went out to the PHP scripting server, which translated that PHP and said, oh, you just want that as the words hello world. And so that's what happened here. So all we see is the HTML. You will not see any PHP code on a page that is saved as .php. All you will see is HTML because it's been translated and re-rendered out on the server. So this was the first little foray into PHP. You can see that it's really important as to how you save your files. Remember, no matter what, it's saved as a .php because that's what's going to tell our scripting server to look for it. Even if our page contains the vast majority is HTML, as was in the case of this demo. In future videos, we're going to look at how we're going to be using this small bit of PHP to create what's called includes that are going to allow us to make our updating and making changes on our website even easier because we are going to use some of the power that PHP offers us.